Let's call to order the February 7th, or February 9th, 2023 Independence Township Planning Commission meeting at 6:01. Please rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You please do roll call, Ms. Tully?
Maybe.
Classes? The volume right, but then I can't see.
Mr. Galley,
Here.
Mr. Lochran,
Here.
Mr. Mazza,
Here.
Mr. Patel,
Here.
Mr. Ritchie.
Here.
Chairman Savadan is absent, and Ms. Tully here.
Thank you. We have a review of the agenda and a motion.
I'll move that we approve the agenda as presented.
Second. We have support, motion and support. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Seeing nobody, motion carries unanimously. Next item, public comment for items that are not on tonight's agenda. And I believe we have one in the audience. Please come up. Name and address for the record, please.
My name is Kelly Bills, and I live at 4890 East Princeton Avenue. And I spoke at the last meeting about getting the chicken ordinance changed from 3 acres to 1 acre. And everybody kind of agreed it was reasonable. And you had said you were going to write up a proposal and send it to the supervisor. So when I didn't see it on the agenda, I had emailed you. And you had sent me an email saying that the Planning Commission has elected not to pursue changes to the zoning ordinance based on the fact that there are too many adverse complications with reducing the lot area required to have them. So I'm just kind of trying to figure out what changed and what happened. And
Do you want to comment or do you want us to comment? It's up to you.
I had spoken with the supervisor and a couple other board members, and they were unwilling to authorize the planning commission to take this any further.
so we actually talked to Mr. Aliaga,
Okay?
and he said he had never spoke to you about that. And
Wow.
his overall theme was that he felt it was outdated, that ordinance.
That's incredible, because I had an hour-and-a-half conversation with him about it. So, okay.
Okay, so now
That's-
that,
I appreciate you telling me that.
And just to comment too, real quick before you continue, when we openly talked about it in the planning commission meeting, I mean, my sense of it is that a few of the members kind of thought it was reasonable to request. If we do come to a consensus on our board, we can, I think Mr. Ritchie had told me, we can recommend it to the board to look at, but they do have the final say.
and who's they?
The
Township
township
Board,
board.
Board of
And that's-
Trustees.
The trustee, the board of trustees,
Correct.
okay.
We recommend the changes to them and review them.
Okay,
They finally approve them after we recommend them.
okay, so, and you proposed that to them?
I proposed it to the supervisor, which is in the minutes that I did.
Okay,
I said I would do. I would take it to the supervisor.
Mhm.
He would have to authorize me and the planning commission to pursue it, because it's coming out of my financial budget, so, to pay for. So,
the
he didn't-
change in the ordinance,
yes,
writing it, okay,
and he did not authorize it.
okay,
Thank you
okay.
Sorry, if you
for
have
telling
more.
me that.
If you have
So,
more, please continue.
is there a way to get it on the agenda still?
I guess in our discussion, we'll talk about it as a group and see what the consensus is
Or-
up here. I mean, that's all we can do at our level. If we do make a recommendation to the board as a consensus, or the consensus of us is to not present it to them, I mean,
Okay,
we can do that during discussion.
so that's typical that a conversation will happen in private then? And
Yeah.
not, okay.
Yeah.
Could
'Cause the
something,
supervisor has the authority to authorize expenditures,
okay,
so.
okay, and then could something else be proposed if if it's not the 1 acre, could it be permits or something along those lines?
I'm sure, you know, we could certainly come up with an ordinance this is the body to do that,
Right.
you know, if they wanted to change it.
Okay,
it-
because
I think-
last meeting, I mean, you said it was reasonable to look
I
into it.
know I
and-
said that was my opinion. and
Not just
I don't
you.
recall the
There,
other
there
ones.
was a few, yeah. I'm not sure, the man who's not here tonight
Mr.
had said that
Sabanon's the
too.
chairman.
Yes.
Mr. Ritchie, did you have something to add?
I was just gonna say that, I think a number of people said it, it's been quite a while since that ordinance had been reviewed.
Correct.
And it at least warranted maybe a review of the ordinance again. And if, you know, we went to the supervisor and he said, no, we can still review it ourselves and present it and do it. But like Brian said, it's coming out of his budget. So, you know, obviously he's treading a little bit lightly because he doesn't want to, you know, go down a sinkhole and,
Right.
you know, and then, you know, end up going nowhere, so.
And I have almost 200 signatures from residents in support too of the change.
And I would say stay diligent and vigilant as far as,
Okay.
you know, continue to, I guess, campaign to, you know, get some review
looked
of the
into.
ordinance, so.
Okay.
Yeah, we
You know,
keep
don't take
getting
the first
signatures.
rebuff as final, so.
Okay.
Can I ask a question? I'm kind of
Sure.
new to this. Was there a complaint or how did they,
There was a complaint from a neighbor. I think you had said it was a noise complaint, but I understood it as just that chickens were on the property.
Well, I mean, it ended up being noise because we heard it, but chickens.
The original complaint
it-
was,
The violation was for the chickens. I mean,
Chickens.
and we went out to investigate, didn't see the chickens, but certainly saw and heard the rooster.
right.
So,
But since then,
unfortunately.
we collected 30 of our closest neighbors' signatures saying that it was okay, that they were okay with us having even our roosters, so.
Brian, is there can they apply for a text amendment? Can the public apply? Is there an application
I
process?
think they need to go through the township board to ask for that. And
Okay, so
then
there's not like a community that I've been involved with before there's a process
Petition, yeah.
that you can petition? No?
And at the board meeting, there still is a line item for public comment for items that
Mhm.
aren't on the agenda.
What board meeting is that? I'm sorry.
Town-
The
Township
township board, you
The
meet.
trustees, okay.
Yeah.
It's
you
at
meet
the
one
first
twice a
and
month?
third Tuesdays of the month.
Okay, so I should attend those as well then?
That's why I say I would keep being
Okay.
diligent.
I wasn't even
about
aware,
talking to
so-
everybody, as many people as you can. And
Okay,
that, like I say, the township board is, you know, what approves, you know, ordinance changes and everything. So-
okay,
Yeah, and I'll bring it up in discussion tonight, and you can either stay or, you know, listen to the minutes or call Brian tomorrow. It's up to you.
okay,
if
we
you-
plan on staying, so we'll,
Okay,
all right.
is that all?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Can you give me the signatures for?
Next item,
Yes,
item
I
F,
need the signatures.
Yeah,
public
you want
hearing.
all these?
There are no public hearings tonight. Moving on to G, regular business. Tonight, we have just one item, PC file 2023-002, miscellaneous zoning ordinance text amendment discussion to possibly change, it looks like, 4 categories of zoning ordinances. Mr. Ottman, I believe you told me you wanted to present the first one?
Yeah, this is at the request of the supervisor. Essentially, it's a very simple change, but it allows the member that is the liaison to the ZBA from the planning commission. It just simply states that they have to be a resident of the township. So this is something that the supervisor wanted reviewed and approved, or at least a recommendation from the planning commission.
And there's no other changes to that ordinance, just that one line?
Yep.
Okay. I guess I'll start with this one. Obviously, I believe that's directed at me not being a resident. It's, you know, I was a resident of Independence Township for 34 years. My family moved here when I was in 3rd grade, I believe. I believe they started to build a house when I was in 2nd grade. And, you know, that was way back when Deer Lake Farms, Deerwood, and maybe the rooftop ski hotel were all the big controversies in the township. Graduated from Clarkson High School. Both my children graduated from Clarkson High School. Being a builder, I had a few spec houses, and our Independence Township house happened to sell because I was carrying too many assets, and, you know, we moved about a mile out into Springfield Township. So I guess that's you know, a bad check mark against me. I did have a couple questions, and then I'll let everybody else chime in. I think I've been on the ZBA for 8 years, maybe 7, 8 years.
At least, yeah.
Has there been any complaints, any court cases, any filings for malfeasance against the ZBA during that time?
None.
Okay. Anybody else want to start? Anybody have any comments?
Sure, I'll start. I mean, I agree. I think it's unnecessary. I mean, there's a reason why this is here, as you mentioned, and I don't understand, you know, why this would be an issue for us. So it's hard to get people to to join these boards, people that have experience, and I don't know why we would turn anybody away from that is doing a good job and frankly, you know, has the experience here. So I don't support this amendment. And I guess the question, I think it's a rhetorical question, but doesn't the board and the supervisors still have purview on selecting ZBA members?
Correct.
Okay, so I mean, at the pleasure of the board and the supervisor, they can make a change anyway.
Correct.
Okay, so again, I don't see why this is necessary.
Is that
Mr. Hoffman?
And just to piggyback on his comment, what, in a sense, whatever this board wants to do, they can do, the current township board. I'm not denying their right to do what they want to do, but you're essentially taking power away from future boards. If a situation were to
That's true.
arise where they,
Yep,
you know.
that is true.
Brian, what do you mean by that? Just
When an ordinance is changed, it affects every resident of the township and every board of the township for the future, unless they change it back. But then that becomes petty. It becomes, in my opinion, like Washington DC, where you switch
so
back and forth all
taking
the
power
time.
away is because of how is it taking power away?
The township board gets to approve all commission members and ZBA members, correct?
Correct.
So the way our ordinance is written, it allowed the board to place one person that may live outside the borders of the township, but had extensive residency, business dealings, whatever it may be, inside the township. So you may live outside the township, but run the McLaren Hospital Center, and you're a value to the township because it's our largest business. So we're gonna put you on the board because we want your input. So it would take that right away from them.
Is it just the ZBA liaison from the planning commission, or is it?
Well, they're saying any member of the ZBA would have to be a resident.
It's all the members, or?
No, this is only referring to the first member with being a member of the planning commission. And then it says, number 3 says that the remaining are from they're electors of the township, so they're essentially residences. Mr. Carlisle's.
Mr. Carlisle, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I wanted to say that, you know,
You're kind of quiet. I don't know if you have a volume issue.
I've never had one before.
No, I'm telling ITV to turn them up.
Okay. I have a lot of
Okay.
other issues, you know, that, am I better?
Yep.
Perfect.
Now.
Okay. You know, just a point of clarification. The township board appoints the members of the planning commission based on the recommendation of the township supervisor. In this specific case, Mr. Galley has been appointed, you know, more than once as a member of the planning commission by the township board. The Enabling Act is silent about who can serve as the planning commission representative, on the ZBA. So the township board has no, you know, without any amendment such as this, the township board has no say-so in terms of who, that they do not appoint the planning commission member to the ZBA. That's a matter of the planning commission deciding who should be a member of the ZBA. All the other members of the ZBA are appointed by the township board. So this is the one sort of anomaly, I guess, in the Enabling Act where the planning commission actually gets to decide who they want to be their member or their representative on the ZBA. Either the legislature didn't contemplate this or they really didn't care about the fact that it could be possible that a non-resident planning commission member could be a member of the zoning board of appeals. And so apparently that was either not consequential nor was it even noticed by our legislature when the Michigan Zoning Enabling Act was passed. So, you know, the only way that this could actually be changed from that standpoint is by local ordinance. And so it really is, you know, the decision of the planning commission to make this recommendation because, and it's up to the township board what they want to do to change this. But actually the state enabling law doesn't say anything about it. So just for that clarification.
Okay, thanks, Dick.
Yeah, and I'll point out that I did research how you were appointed, Mr. Galley, and that was a year ago, I believe. And you were actually appointed by the board to the PC and also the ZBA
Yeah,
as the liaison.
yeah.
So the board actually took that action from the planning commission, because in other communities, a lot of times the planning commission, you know, like when you elect your chair and your vice chair and all of that, they also elect the liaison, you know, they'll pick a liaison for that time.
Yeah.
So
I wonder if that was just a mistake, because I think I remember the first time I did it, the PC did vote.
I thought they did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just-
There's no requirement in the act for that.
Just one more quick comment before we continue. And no hard feelings either way. Whatever you guys think on this board, we'll do. I just wanted to speak my thoughts, and they're my thoughts only. So what if, you know, the pleasure of you guys. And anybody else wish to chime in on this? Ms. Dolly?
But you are legally appointed currently, correct?
He will be able to finish out his term, which is, I believe, another 2 years.
On the planning commission?
And the
And the
No,
ZBA.
and the ZBA,
Yeah,
because the board appointed him.
okay. So there's been some sort of a change in the requirements, evidently.
This is, I believe, you probably saw it in the newspaper, but I believe this was a promise by the supervisor to the people, and that's why he's requested that it be placed in front of you. There's
I
no,
see.
as Mr. Carlisle said,
There's
there's
no
really,
legislative
there's no
change.
legislative requirement for this.
Mr. Ritchie?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I guess my thought process on this is that the planning commission, all the people on the planning commission are appointed and approved by the supervisor and the board of trustees. And if they're appointed and approved by the board of trustees for the planning commission, it shouldn't make any difference to me who the liaison from that group is to the ZBA. Because they were all,
Approved by the
if
board.
they were vetted and approved by the board, then they should be equally, you know, well-versed to serve in the ZBA as well, so.
Well, and that brings up another good point, is that, you know, if the current supervisor is the supervisor for 10 years or 15 years, then he has approved everybody who's in those seats.
Right, and like I
So-
say, if he wants to make a change at the end of any of those terms, then that's his prerogative to do, so.
Correct.
So to me, this is,
Kind of a
this
moot point.
extra line that they're adding, that, you know, to me is a redundant point, because he already has this capability of doing that.
Yeah, that's my
Oh.
point.
You know, when you come up, it's no different than Supreme Court justices or any of those types of things. It's like when it's your turn, you know, to pick and choose, that's, you know, that's when you get to pick and choose.
Is the planning commission the same as the ZBA? they can live in or out of the township? Or do the members of the planning commission have to live in the township?
One
Only
member.
one member.
Yep, one member of the planning commission can be outside the township.
Only one? But
ZBA,
everybody-
as by local ordinance there in point 3, number 3 there says that they're selected from electors of the township.
So just a quick background on the ZBA, Mr. Mazza, one member is the liaison from the PC. Number 2 says the second member may be a member of the Board of Trustees of the Township Board. Currently, we don't have a Township Board member on the ZBA. So it's a 5-member board, so the other 4 members are township residents. Action on these 4 items it's a recommending action, correct?
Yeah, and we have to still have a public hearing on all of these items.
And
So
we
these
want to
are-
separate an action on each one? Or
I
between the
would-
first one and the second 3?
I would recommend that we separate them all. There'll be 4
Make it easier?
different public hearings at a future meeting,
Okay,
if you elect to even proceed past tonight.
okay. Any other comment on the first item?
Mr. Loughran
Lofgren.
asked, and you verified, that the township board, if we had a bad apple that lived outside the township, they could pull them anyway, not necessarily wait till the end of their term, right? They could,
We've been advised by our attorneys that he has to serve out the rest of his term.
okay. So
But if
that's-
there was malfeasance
Well-
or something, you can
Well, yeah.
take a removal
Yeah,
action.
exactly.
Yeah.
There's ways to
Okay.
do it. Yeah.
All right, so, okay.
The requirements by, it very specifically states that there's a process now, which there never used to be before in the Enabling Act, that a member has to be charged with misfeasance, malfeasance, or nonfeasance. Obviously, misfeasance means you did something wrong, but you really didn't know what you did. Malfeasance means you purposely did something wrong, and nonfeasance means you're just not doing anything. So, and there's a process. There has to be a hearing. I mean, it's due process. And so if the board were dissatisfied with the performance of any member of the Planning Commission or the ZBA, they have the ability to follow the process of removing that member.
Thanks, Dick.
I got one more question. Dick or Brian, can you explain what 3 actually says?
Which is 3. Yeah,
So they can't be essentially from the village. They can't live in the village of Clarkson.
Because
City
it's a
of the
city inside the border of the township.
Yeah.
I mean, I understand what we're trying to say, but the remaining members of the Board of Appeals shall be selected from the electors of the township residing outside of incorporated cities and villages.
yeah. That is straight out of the Enabling Act.
And the members are selected from, or should be representative of the population. Now, define that, I guess that's some weaselly words from the legislation, and they have to have varying interests. Our ZBA actually, we have a planner on the ZBA, we have builders. The ZBA is very parcel specific in the decision-making that they make. So we have all of our board members at the ZBA are very experienced, and you want those type of people on the ZBA, to understand what people are trying to build or whatever. So,
I just had trouble with understanding the language, and if you guys got it, then I guess I'm fine, but.
Okay, does somebody want to
there's some legislature
Forward,
later put that in.
recommending motion, or?
Basically, at this point, it's just a, recommendation to set a public hearing, and if you want any changes.
Well,
Go ahead, Dick. Are you saying something?
Well, I was gonna say, I mean, I think, this has been sent to the planning commission to, to consider this as, as an amendment. I mean, your choices really are to go ahead and just set the public hearing and hear what the public has to say. Or, you know, I believe that the planning commission, you know, this is a request. Brian, how was it requested from the board for the planning commission to act on this? Was it a request to evaluate it?
Yeah, to review
was
it. It's just a
to review it?
simply to review it.
Okay, so your choices are, if you can simply say that, you know, you reviewed this and you can either agree that you should consider this and go ahead and set the public hearing, or you can say that we do not, and you'll have to state your reasons to the board. We don't agree with this, and therefore recommend that recommend to the board that we will not further pursue this. But, you know, there's no, I guess on the other hand, I mean, from your level, from your point, if the board's asked you to do this, you still have the ability to hold a public hearing, do your fact finding, and still make a recommendation that is either saying that, you know, we would recommend approval of it, or we recommend that we don't approve this amendment. You have that option.
Could we recommend to continue it or table it?
Sure.
Sure can.
If you want additional information and further discussion, absolutely.
Is there anybody on the commission that feels that this should move forward, the public hearing?
As opposed to
I feel like I'm
tabling it, I
walking
don't
inside.
understand.
As opposed to
what-
just not moving it forward too?
What would a public hearing hurt? And in Galley's defense, I've known Galley for many years. He's very knowledgeable, does a great job at everything he does. I've watched him make tough choices, and back during that 07, 08 downturn. I mean, could there be a conflict of interest? Not in Brian's case, but a potential outsider being the liaison to the ZBA from the planning commission, where they're not gonna have the same care or love for the township because they're living outside? Possibly make decisions for monetary gain, or what's your thoughts on that?
Like that could be said by any of the planning commission or ZBA members, couldn't it? So, I mean, I don't know.
I mean, I
That's
guess
what I'm
there's-
saying. I think if, you know, that goes back to my point about, you know, each person has been, you know, like vetted and voted upon by the board. So, I mean, they've already been chosen. So if they thought that criteria, living outside the township was a major criteria, then it seems like it would have come up as a negative at that point in time. So
That's how I feel as well.
I you know, that's my opinion as far as, you know, that's why you have that nomination and review and vote by the Board of Trustees to appoint these people, so.
And I don't know what's going on with Galley, but, you know, he's got, either way, you've got 2 years left, Brian? Your term?
I believe so.
Yes, yes.
I just show up.
So,
Tell me not to.
whether or not you know, if this passes, they can pull him for being a non-resident, or,
They just
They-
won't reappoint him.
yeah.
Mhm.
But in the future, you know, is this potentially a good idea? If Brian wasn't sitting there, it's someone else.
Doesn't make a difference to me.
I mean, the board could still say no, because, and their reasoning could be that he doesn't live in the township. That's why I don't feel it's necessary because of that. That's why I'm trying to figure it out.
And what does a public hearing do? If we get set up for a public hearing,
It's a notice in the newspaper, the Clarkston News, and then people have a right to come and speak
And speak, but then.
positively or negatively towards the amendment.
And then who votes from there?
Planning Commission.
But if it doesn't pass, does it automatically go to the board at that point?
It's, well, it could either die or, Dick, I mean, I suppose you could recommend denial of an amendment to the board.
Oh, well, I mean, only after a public hearing, yeah.
Or it could just die. I mean, because planning
No,
commission.
no, well, if they recommend, if the planning commission recommends denial, it still has to go to the township board, because that's your recommendation.
That's what I was getting
On
at.
ordinance amendments, ultimately, it's the decision of the township board.
So the difference is if we deny the public hearing, it would not get to the board. And if we hold the public hearing and then deny it, it would go to the board.
Well, unfortunately, I didn't see, the wording of I believe that the request that came before you was to consider this as an amendment. I don't think it was any directive. I'd have to go back and look at this, as to whether the board was asking you, or saying that we want to make this amendment, we're sending it down to you for study. I don't know if that's exactly how it was worded. There's no, I mean, there's no, you're not committing yourself to a decision by holding a public hearing, other than, having to deal with another ordinance amendment that at this point doesn't sound like the planning commission's very warm about, as it is anyway. But there's no, that doesn't commit you to anything if you decide to do that. But again, I would suggest right now, I didn't see the exact request that came to the planning commission. So if the commission has some question about it, I'd suggest just table this matter right now. We'll bring it up next month, especially since it's not going to affect Mr. Galley's current appointment anyway. We've got time to work on this.
That's true.
In response to, Mr. Mazza's, point, yeah, it's true that that could be the case, but I mean, there's really very huge implications if somebody that's really of not good character or poor character being appointed to the planning commission, from that standpoint too, who's in it for some other reason. So, the law allows a non-resident to be appointed to the planning commission. So there's large implications of that. And, as Mr. Ritchie kind of suggested, the solution to that problem for any future supervisor is, if you don't believe in that provision of the law, don't pass it, don't adopt, don't appoint a non-resident, So that's the solution, really, from that standpoint. But I would say that if you're in doubt about what specific action you should take, table this tonight.
To me, that's a good thought, just because I think it gives us more time to think about it and decide what the right thing to do is. We can review the request and everything as well.
Okay, do we have a motion? Mr. Lockren?
Sure.
You tackle it.
I move to table, well, it's all one PC file, right? So it just, the first item, okay.
For the amendment to section 1402. Yeah.
Gotcha. Move to table item PC file 2023-002, miscellaneous zoning ordinance text amendments discussion pertaining to the ZBA PC liaison in section 14.02.
We have a motion?
Support.
Support? Go ahead and do roll call, Ms. Tully.
Mr. Galley,
Yes.
Mr. Lockren,
Yes.
Mr. Mazza,
Can you clarify one thing for me? If it's tabled, when will it come back up?
Next month.
Yes.
Mr. Patel?
Yes.
Mr. Ritchie?
Yes.
Mr. Savidan is absent, and Ms. Tully, yes.
Okay, motion to table carries unanimously. The next three items, Mr. Carlisle, I hear you're gonna present those?
Yep.
Okay, floor is yours.
Let's see, which one is the next one, Brian? Is it the?
Plan
Extensions.
Okay.
Extension.
Yeah, extension. I think this was another request that came from the board, wasn't it, Brian?
Yes, correct.
Yeah, but actually, I think it's probably, I think it's, not a bad idea from that standpoint. Because we have seen, circumstances where we've had multiple extensions of site plans. And yet, there may have been circumstances that have changed over that period of time that might affect a planning commission's decision. So what these two amendments do, and they're worded slightly differently, but what this would do would be to limit the planning commission granting of extensions to no more than two one-year extensions on a site plan. And the same thing with a special land use, no more than 2 extensions on special approval for more than 1 year per extension. And that's as simply as I can put it. So in other words, a site plan gets approved, someone could theoretically apply for 2 one-year extensions. With a special approval, someone could apply for 2 one-year extensions. Kind of silly in some ways because in all cases, we have a site plan that goes along with a special land use, so it'll be concurrent anyway.
Okay, so just to bring back the last extension we did, that it would be the same procedure. They come in front of the planning commission, ask for the extension. Chances are it's pretty much the same PC, so the case is fresh.
Yep.
They discuss it, positives, negatives, see if there's anything to warrant the extension, and then grant or deny. Same procedure
Correct.
as the last one we did, other than you're limiting it to, was there any limit in the previous ordinance?
No, there wasn't, and actually in practicality, Brian, I don't remember any site plan that I can think of that ever had more than 2 extensions. The only one that I could think of that had actually even 2 extensions, I think there was a recent one, but was the hotel.
Okay.
And those.
Wellbridge.
Yeah, and I think that, Walbridge too, maybe, yeah,
Wellbridge
too.
had many extensions.
Yeah, okay. That's okay. But, it's not that common, and so I don't think that limited to 2 extensions is usually if a project doesn't occur even after 1 extension, it's usually dead anyway. So, or it's gonna be changed, as we just learned today about the gas station on the corner of Sashabaw and Walden. They've rethought that too. So anyway,
Okay.
I don't think it's unreasonable. I don't think this is an unreasonable limitation.
Okay. Anybody else on any questions, comments?
So the process then would be to submit as a whole new, it wouldn't be a site plan amendment, or would it be?
No, it's just a simple, we treat
It's an
these as
extension.
simple requests.
No, I'm saying if they've run out of their extensions, they resubmit as a
They-
site plan amendment, or just
Starts all over.
full site plan?
Get started over.
But we have that party store on Dixie Highway that's been under construction for a long time.
They had an active building
Yeah,
permit.
that's different than us extending. This is pre-construction when we extend.
So as long as you've done a little bit, you don't need to get an extension?
No, you have to apply for a building permit in order to not need an extension. So you have a year to apply for that building permit and start the process.
So why, evidently a building permit was granted,
Oh, yeah.
and
Yeah.
what does that take to get a building permit?
Well, they have to submit construction drawings and have plan reviewed, conducted, and then they start their construction.
Isn't there some time frame on the building permit though, too?
Building permits are good for 6 months. They're allowed to have one extension for 6 more months. But generally, if work is continuing, which in that case, under the previous administration, the work was allowed to continue. He was also ticketed multiple times, but, you
There
know,
was also a court battle with the wind damage and stuff, I
Yeah.
believe.
Had a wall fall down.
yeah, there's a whole host of major issues with that project. But point is they got their permit within the 12 months that they needed to after
I
the
see.
planning commission.
Yeah, that was my concern, that we would have projects kind of stopped, you know, where otherwise maybe they would keep going forward.
Typically it's up to them when they want to apply to start their construction. Major projects still go through construction plan review. We've got several sets of construction plans in right now, one being the one you just extended for review. Also Eagle Ridge Estates, the amendment to phase 2, they're about to submit their construction plan, so that process takes time. But then after that, they start rolling on permits in the building department. So I don't know that anything's really gonna stop.
Well, there's only 3 reasons why something stops. Either they run into a major problem that halts their construction. It could be like a contamination problem or soils problem, or a wall falls down like this happened. Or second of all, they run into financial issues, which happens very often, lose their financing, or there's some, or the third is they're just incompetent. There's no motivation for a competent, qualified developer and development project to want to stop, because every day that they're not
money.
working on the project, it costs them lots of money. So that's usually, that's pretty much what happens. I mean, we have an economic downturn and people lose their financing. Yeah, that's a problem.
Well, that was my only thought, was the Great Recession. I mean, I remember having projects that needed a lot more than 3 years, so.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
What about a phase project, like, say, the Pulte project, where there's multiple phases and sections of that? Is it the first permit they're set on the
Yeah.
entire site? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, is that a question for me?
Oh, Brian answered it, but he said yes.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry, I missed it.
Okay, Mr. Ritchie?
Yeah, I guess to address Ms. Tully's comments, I think I guess since I'm the board of trustees liaison to the planning commission, part of what was talked about, I think, that night was the ongoing extension of the site plan. If you keep doing it for multiple years, does the situation of that property maybe change over time? So
Right.
they were saying there should be some end to it, and that's where I think we came up with this. Come up with a time frame, and then call that. After that, basically you have to start over.
It's 3 years.
So it either
Yeah,
incentivizes you or kills it, one of the two. So, and I think that's this gives you 3 years from the start of the
Right.
project to doing something. So
yeah. Thank you.
Mr. Mauser?
Every time this site plan's extended past that first year, the second year, third year, is there a review, or is it just of the actual site plan again, or is it just an extension?
No, you're reviewing the merits of the extension. You don't,
Okay.
it's not rejudicating the site plan all over again.
Okay. But if you go the 2 extensions, the full 3 years, then it would be a complete review of everything.
Yeah, if they
starting
decide
all
to come
over.
back, yeah. They'd have to
you
start
make
over.
changes you thought needed to be based on that time frame.
The-
So,
Current,
The extensions are only good for 1 year, though.
yeah, so if he comes back multiple times and he runs
Yeah.
out of chances,
Total of 3 years.
yeah, I mean, then he'll have
Yeah.
to resubmit, and the ordinance may have changed, you never know. So It may alter the site plan slightly. Who knows?
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? I mean, the changes seem reasonable to me, and I guess, Mr. Ritchie, a point you made clarified it for me. For the circumstances of the property change, that something could be developed on the parcel next door that would change the setback requirements or such, so, yeah, it's a good point.
Could be any number of changes, like say, other ordinance changes or whatever that make,
Yeah.
it's like, boy,
Yeah.
that affected that
No.
place or whatever.
Seems reasonable, so,
I agree.
somebody want to forward a motion?
I did the last one.
I'll move on PC file 2023-002 for the Planning Commission extensions, section 6.08 and 7.03 be changed to include the, as presented in the packet. The wording as approved in the packet.
To set a public hearing.
Yeah.
Oh, it's a public hearing.
Possible.
Way that we would regulate childcare institutions and resident and a new category of residential treatment facilities. So the Child Care Licensing Act, this is a circumstance where they didn't technically amend the Michigan Zoning Enabling Act, but they amended basically the Daycare Act, okay, the Child Care Licensing Act, where I guess there's been this sort of push because of, child care issues and, working families, where, they wanted to provide additional options or increase capacity for child care. And so what they did is they allowed the Department of Licensing to increase the permissible number of children in a family daycare home from 6 to 7, and in a group daycare home from 12 to 14. If an applicant applied for a classification of what they called, quote, increased capacity. So what this did is this was not an amendment to the Michigan Zoning Enabling Act. It was an amendment to the Child Care Licensing Act that now affects, that essentially now says that whereas, and I think they did, I'm trying to remember, but I think they did make some reference to this in the Enabling Act. But basically, it basically says that now where it used to be considered that a family daycare home of 6 or fewer children was considered a residential use of property and therefore a permitted use. Now it's 7. Now we still require group daycare homes to be considered as special land uses in any residential district. So that change from 12 to 14 is really immaterial, but the change of one additional child now is it's increasing the number of children that can be taken care of in a family daycare home from 6 to 7. So, I mean, I don't think that this is of huge significance, but it is something that, sort of through the back door, the legislature now has increased the capacity of what used to be considered 6 for a family daycare home and a residential use of property to 7. The more significant one is the residential treatment facilities, and what has been a little troubling to me is it's been very difficult to try to get background information in terms of why this really was even done. But this has been a direct and directly enacted into the Michigan Zoning Enabling Act. That it was amended that now says that a qualified residential treatment program that provides services for 10 or fewer individuals is a residential use of property. A residential use of property is a qualified treatment program cannot be subject to special or conditional use. And however, the term qualified residential treatment program only applies to child caring institution. It's very convoluted, but a child caring institution is some organization that provides a nonprofit that provides services to children. What this allows for is that a qualified child caring institution could have a qualified residential treatment program being conducted in a residential setting. What has been, I guess, troubling to me is the fact that the legislature now has is basically saying, you know, under a normal adult foster care or under family daycare homes, the number was 6. You know, now 7 for daycare homes. Now what they're saying is a residential treatment program that has 10 residents of children are considered to be a residential use of property. The other aspects of this, as my memo indicates, is that these facilities have certain requirements that go above and beyond what I would think to be a residential use of property. The program that's got to be offered has to involve families into the treatment, including siblings, which would mean that if it's being conducted out of a residential setting, then you may well have families also receiving treatment out of that residence. It also says that the care has to continue for at least 6 months after the child is no longer in residence. So there's this constant follow-up that may also be conducted out of the residence. So, I mean, I think there's a lot of vague questions that I have actually written a legislator who I happen to know who's a licensed therapist and asked twice, what is the thinking behind this without any success from that standpoint? So I am, I'm really a little bit torn about this because I know that this is what the law has now been changed to, and we need to respond to this. But I'm also concerned about some of the implications of this, that this is sort of the camel's nose in the tent for all kinds of other non-child residential treatment facilities that are considered a residential use of property in residential areas. So this is a very complicated issue, as you might suspect.
Yeah, I read through it earlier this week and I was confused. And after listening to you, I'm confused.
Yeah.
But in a nutshell, you're trying to match our ordinance to current law to be compliant.
Right.
But you can't get a straight answer on what the spirit of that law is without being too mechanical about the wording you're inserting into our ordinance, in a nutshell.
Correct.
Yeah,
And Brian, the other difficulty of this is that, I mean, we're dealing with, this is a use that's a very specialized thing that we don't have a lot of education about at this point. I don't know. I mean, I'm trying to do it. I'm trying to do a lot of research on it, but it's been difficult to sort of figure this all out.
Yeah. Yeah, and I just don't know if I would have a specific question that would facilitate this because, like I said, it's technical and confusing. So, and anybody else on the commission?
I guess we talked about child care or, children there, but then it talks about adult foster care or group homes as well. So it's kind of, are we only talking about minors at these homes, or are we talking about the adult group homes as well?
Yeah, let's kind of try to break these down to two. The increased capacity provision only applies to childcare, daycare, child, either family or group daycare homes. So that
had to be a minor.
issue is pretty straightforward. Yeah, and they're all minor children. Yeah, that's the definition by our ordinance and by state law of what constitutes a daycare, a child daycare center or child care home. The second issue, all involving child care institutions and residential treatment, is way more complicated because these are uses. This is an introduction of terminology into the Zoning Enabling Act that has never been there before. While this term may have been in other state acts related to that particular type of care, it's never shown up in the Zoning Enabling Act. And you go back and you look through the when this stuff comes through, I always go back and look through the legislative reports to both the House and the Senate, and try to figure out and try to get as much information as and the information on this is incredibly vague. So I guess what I'm trying to say, I'm introducing this to you. I'm not prepared to say let's move forward on this. I have not had an opportunity to really speak with Mr. Kelly about this. I still feel that we need better explanation as to why they increased the number to 10 for these types of things as a residential use of property. But it is something that we're going to have to deal with. Right now, for example, however, I will tell you, whether we do anything with the ordinance or not, if we have a family daycare home that receives their certification or whatever the state's going to issue for increased capacity, my belief is there's nothing we can do about that. If the state says you are now licensed for 7, even though the law has always said 6 before, I don't think there's anything we can do about it. And frankly, it's a relatively minor problem. This is a much bigger, more complicated issue, and I need to have better advice to be able to better advise you what it all means. But this is the best I've come up with so far.
Yeah, I just have 2 comments. So I agree. I think we should get Mr. Kelly involved, but I don't think you've done a lot of research and did a good job trying to figure it out and explain as best you can. I think we do need some legal, assistance on it. And I guess I'm going to ask a stupid question. I mean, we're just trying to mimic what state law is anyway, right?
Yes.
So could we be, is less is more? Could we just say these types of facilities need to meet the minimum standards? And that's a case-by-case basis? I just don't want to put anything here that doesn't match or is it allows more than what the state law actually does allow just by mistake. That's my only thought process.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's feasible or not. It's just a thought I have. So.
Yeah. And I guess that's a great question, and that's another reason definitely that Brian and I have spoken about this. I needed to introduce this because it's become law now, but I think that there's probably a lot of people scratching their head about this and trying to figure out what to do.
Okay. Ms. Tully?
Dick, I was just wondering on the Child Care Licensing Act, where they're there less than 24 hours. How does that fit in with the woman down the street who's taking neighbors' kids in, before and after the bus, or?
That's what it is.
That's
we're
what it
talking
is?
about. Yeah, it's a daycare.
And then- That
Yeah,
has-
it's a daycare. I mean, we're talking about family daycare and group daycare homes and, and that definition has been, that actual definition has been in our ordinance since the child care, amendments were added to the Zoning Enabling Act, oh my gosh, before the last go around, I mean, years ago. So it's essentially, it's a family, it's a daycare, you know? And our ordinance and the state law recognizes, three different categories. It's a daycare center, and we've approved a number of those, with 50 or 100 kids, and those are in non-residential settings. And then you have daycare homes, and you have two categories of those. You have what's called a family daycare home, which by state law has to be permitted as of right as a residential use of property. And then you have group daycare homes, which is more children, obviously, 12, that we regulate by special approval use. I really can't remember the last time we approved a group daycare home. We have had, I think, probably a couple. I don't remember, but it's been years. But we probably have a lot of family daycare homes that you may or may not even know about. So, but yeah, you obviously have one, Judy, in your neighborhood. That's probably what that is. Licensed by the state for 6 or fewer children, now can have 7.
I didn't understand it was licensed and all that. It just seems so informal. But the other,
They do have to be licensed by the state. I mean, and there's strict requirements, and there are, the state does respond to complaints.
but this other one, the Qualified Residential Treatment Program,
Mhm.
I mean, it sounds like those could be damaged children, really. I mean,
Yeah,
And
I mean, it's children that have probably suffered from been in some kind of abusive situation, absolutely. And it had to been taken out of the home because of that.
But then to
Um,
put that in a neighborhood, I don't know, it seems like an issue.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Mr. Kyle? Mr. Ritchie?
I guess I just want to make a comment that, I think as a board, with Dick's input and everything, I think we, maybe need to table this to a future meeting and maybe have some more education on, as the board, just, so we understand what we're talking about as well, so. 'Cause
Right.
To me, I don't think we're anywhere close to making a decision on this.
No.
So,
Mr. Lockron?
Just one other,
No,
go ahead.
And I'm not prepared, I wasn't prepared to ask you to do that either. If I'd been able to get more information before tonight from the people I've been asking, I may be able to be more informative, but I did need to get this out there because it is something we're gonna have to deal with.
I just think the board, would need to see some examples of what we're talking about for each one of these categories and everything to be more educated on this topic, so.
And they require quite a bit of property.
That's what we're saying,
to
is
be
it, is
available.
it just a single, family resident, or is it, apartment buildings, is it, where can all this happen at? I think we just need to be clearer
Yeah.
They
on
need a
all the
big
different
play
aspects of
area.
it, so.
I mean, my concern is you'd buy 2 houses next to each other, or 3 or 4, now you've got a commercial enterprise. I know when I started out, way back when as a planning tech, city to remain nameless, there were people that would come in and study the map that showed where the group homes were, and they could only be within like a quarter mile or eighth of a mile from each other. So there was kind of a cottage industry of people seeing where the circles were, and they could then buy a house there. So are we limiting them to, or can we, for any distances? Because we could there. I mean, it was a different state, but.
Yeah. Yeah, the irony of all this is that the state does not enforce the distance requirements anymore.
Okay.
And I think our ordinance may still have it. Most ordinances still do, but the state does not enforce it. They will not enforce it. There was a challenge to that. I don't remember the specifics of it, but I know that they do not enforce the separation requirements anymore.
And I seem to recall in the past that they had to come into the office and actually have some zoning authority approval, even for the small daycare, the 1 to 6, and they've done away with that. I mean, so now we have no idea. I know the state has a map that you can look at, but it's sketchy at best, and who knows how accurate it even is. So, I mean, we have no idea where these are at. Usually we know where they're at, but based on complaints we get. So, you know, whether it's garbage, it's blight type stuff.
Don't they need like a home occupation or a business license or something?
We don't have a business license.
No.
But
And
that's
you actually couldn't require one anyway.
Well,
I'm just saying that the
You-
knowledge
you-
of,
you did-
excuse me,
There is a specific preemption in the state law from you regulating it as anything other than a single-family residence for a family daycare.
Mr. Ritchie.
Yeah, I guess one point more I wanted to make, and it's not knowing how many of these we have and location of it. It's like, how is it taxing our infrastructure, like for police, fire, and those types of things?
Yeah.
For different responses. You know, we talked about like just our regular senior homes that we have, where we have several of them now. How many? You know, the fire department's now giving us statistics on how many runs they make to each one of those places, and how it's, you know, continually increasing.
Yeah, we had one a few years ago before COVID over by the racetrack that was calling incessantly 911, you know, so these centers are a lot more taxing than anybody ever realizes. And we had one also out on Horseshoe Circle at the north end doing the same thing.
Well, I just think that's part of the education I think we need to have on this whole topic as well, so.
well, I'd venture to say that there's a lot of them out there that you don't even know about.
Especially small ones, yeah.
Yeah. All right, any more questions or motion to
so we motioning to continue?
table?
Yeah.
Table?
Table? I'll make the motion. And
Dick, do you need more time to review this than next month, or?
I think I probably will, and I, you know, I mean, I don't feel that we need to exert a great deal of pressure. I don't feel a great deal of pressure to rush this, but I also felt an obligation to inform you of this, because eventually I'd have to come, we'd have to come before you and say, we got to do something about these amendments. So
Date uncertain.
give us a little more time, and I'll ask to have it put back on the agenda when I feel comfortable that I know enough about this.
So it's
Alright.
really a postponement.
to a date uncertain or
Yeah.
just postpone? Okay. All right, I move to postpone to a date uncertain PC file 2023-002 miscellaneous zoning ordinance text amendment pertaining to daycare facilities, Article 2, Section 8.04.
I'll go ahead and support. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Seeing none, motion carries unanimously. Okay, last text amendment item, dual drive-through facilities.
Yes. I think we did talk about this, if I remember correctly. I don't remember, but you know, we've had a couple of requests for dual drive-throughs, and you know, I mean, this is actually distinguished, and this is not actually dual drive-throughs. It's actually dual ordering stations, not dual drive-throughs. We specifically prohibit dual drive-throughs, meaning more than one establishment within a single building, so that you have multiple drive-throughs. We actually had something like that proposed at one point in time, which was like one of these, you know, co-branded type things, and each had it. I mean, the entire building was encircled with a drive-through. It was pretty amazing. But anyway, it never went anywhere. But anyway, but what has been very common is, as we know, and it's particularly, as I said in my memo, particularly post-COVID, and can't really say post, but you know, post the bad part, really bad part of COVID, you know, people have, you know, are ordering food, you know, via drive-through more frequently, and in many of the fast food type restaurants, 80, 90% of their business comes via drive-through. So this was a little bit prompted by a request by Culver's to be able to put in dual ordering stations. You'd go to just about anywhere, and most McDonald's have them now. Our McDonald's, I believe, did both of them were granted dual ordering stations by the ZBA?
Correct.
Yeah. So we've had these requests granted by the ZBA. I figured let's just make this official in the ordinance. So really what this ordinance does, it allows dual ordering stations associated with a drive-through that is permitted upon your approval, and that's basically through a site plan approval. And then I also realized that what we needed to do is then also allow for duplicate sign, order for each ordering station to have a ordering, a sign basically. So these two amendments would allow for a dual ordering station with a single drive-through, as and with the proper identification for each ordering station, and not exceeding the requirements that we established for single ordering stations in the previous ordinance amendment. So that's what this does.
Yeah, I think we've had a few at the ZBA, and we make the menu boards be the same size, have the same, landscaping and clearance requirements, and when they came in front of us, they essentially educated us on it, how it speeds up everything, it's more efficient, and there's less stacking, less cars backed up into the drive. So I think from a safety and a perspective, it made sense in the ones we granted. So I think it's becoming more and more common, and I don't think aesthetically it affects negatively on the fast food service stations as they sit. It just allows another menu board basically. Anybody else have any comments or questions? Mr. Mazza?
Are there requirements for first responders or emergency vehicles to be able to go around, get out?
Yeah. Yep. We require, all our drive-throughs require an escape lane, meaning a second lane. And we've been very diligent about that to make sure that we have emergency access, to drive through. There's been maybe an exception or two for some reasonable, considerations, but we do require escape lanes.
Does the Starbucks on Sashabaw have one?
No, it doesn't, but it has an access
Cross access.
from the neighboring site that we felt was going to be sufficient to provide, sufficient access, for emergency vehicles if there was a problem.
So it's reviewed on a case-by-case basis then?
Well, it is an ordinance requirement. In that case, I'm trying to remember how that.
Project had several variances, I believe.
I think it had a variance or whatever, yeah.
Is it a really
But,
narrow lot?
when you say case by case, no, I mean, it's, requiring an escape lane is an ordinance requirement. It could only be varied by, through a variance.
They have to maintain that cross-access with the neighbor to the north on that parking lot. That was part of the requirement, right? So
Yeah.
that way allow two ways in for emergency vehicles or whatever. Obviously, you couldn't go up the actual drive-through path next to the building, but there was two other ways to get into the property.
Well, you answered my question. I was just curious if, without
Yep.
them getting a variance to do the second lane now, but if that escape lane's required, I think that's good.
Yep.
This is a special land use approval, right? For a drive-through or no?
Yes.
Okay. So it's gonna come to us and we'll have,
In most cases, I believe it is.
Yeah, I don't want to speak wrongly, but special land use essentially means if it changes use or switches owners, we can review the use of the drive-through, correct?
If you put that condition on it.
Yeah.
And this, oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I'm hopeful that it will be an improvement, because right now, left to their own devices, you know, these, car lanes wind through the parking lot and all around, and hopefully this will organize it better. Is that a guarantee?
Can't guarantee it, but, you know,
It does speed up the process. I
it
mean,
does,
that's-
yeah. It moves
yeah.
people a lot quicker.
I think it's currently in use just at McDonald's, isn't it, or is there another one that?
It's
Yeah.
McDonald's, and we had a request from Culver's, but I'm sure they'll be back,
Yeah,
because on a Friday or Saturday night, it's very, very crowded there,
yeah.
so.
And this is exempt from the sign ordinance, right? Didn't we put special exemptions for menu boards?
These
Well,
are
it's not
miscellaneous signs
exempt.
that are still regulated.
I didn't mean it was, I guess
We
I
don't
meant
call,
from,
we can't call it a menu board, but
Yeah.
it's, yeah,
yeah, that's right.
it's still, it's the same thing.
They still require a sign permit.
And those
We,
menu
we
boards.
call
can-
it we call
can
it
be
a drive-through accessory sign,
But I mean,
whatever that means.
we'll,
That's
guess
a,
I'm-
that's a menu board.
I guess what I'm talking about is, we allowed the LCD signs, but we didn't allow any movement in that sort of thing, and we were pretty specific about it. But this, I'd imagine, I mean, I've been to some of these, they do have LCD in their
Pictures and.
pictures,
movement.
and yeah,
Yeah.
so how is that
McDonald's-
regulated?
Yeah, McDonald's got, actually, it's been more than McDonald's that have gone for digital menu boards. The Tim Hortons, and they've had to go through the zoning board of appeals
Oh,
previously. I think they're allowed now in our current sign ordinance.
right.
But
So
it's
that's
also
my
part of the
question.
reason why the menu boards or those accessory signs aren't visible from the road. and
Right.
Everything as well.
Yeah.
so.
Right.
Okay.
Any
That-
other
that
questions?
makes a distraction. You make a motion? Are we done?
Yeah, no more questions.
Okay. And PC file 2023-002 for dual drive-through facility, section 10.03 and 12.06. We set a public hearing and review or amend the ordinance as presented.
Motion by Richie, do we have support?
I'll support.
Support by Mazza. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Seeing none, motion carries unanimously. Before we close this item and move on, I guess I'll just bring it up. The township resident that petitioned us about the, I believe it was Class 3 animal section of our ordinance. In discussion, when you, Mr. Ritchie, you talked about, you know, possibly just saying, suggest to the township board that that section be reviewed, then it's up to them to approve it or deny it. You know, I don't want to spend a lot of time on this because we already talked about it last meeting, and it is a current ZBA case. But, you know, I don't know what the commission's thoughts are, if they would like to take an action like that and just have a quick discussion about it, or,
Well, Brian and Dick, as far as I'm concerned, you know, as a planning commission, we can, you know, we've done this with other ordinances in the past, I thought, where we reviewed them and said we want to send them to the board to get them updated or changed. Can we do that with this ordinance as well? Just do this on our own and present it to the township board?
You're talking about the chicken ordinance?
Yes.
Yes?
So, I mean, we don't have to wait for, you know, a request from the board.
Authorization.
We could, we do it ourselves. Obviously, like I say, it comes out of our budget and everything for planning commission, so.
And we'd have to review the current ordinance, right?
Right, that's what I'm saying, we could review the
Yeah.
ordinance and decide if we wanna make changes or whatever. You know, decide we wanna, you know, how far we wanna go, we wanna hold a public hearing, whatever, we can do all the same things.
I just would want a little bit of direction for us on what you would like to see changed in this ordinance, because it's a lengthy ordinance that covers a multitude of different, you know, we have 3 types of animals. You know, is this only gonna be related to Class 3, and are we just talking about acreage a lot, changes, or what are we talking about?
Yeah, I guess if I could print out the whole ordinance and read it word for word and mark it up and maybe send it back to you, and we could do it on a board internally. I guess, from my perspective, I wouldn't want to spend legal time on it or your time until we knew there was a consensus if we're taking it on ourselves, but those are just my thoughts. And class 3 animals are the common household pets,
Chicken.
chickens, rabbits, small pets, dogs.
No, it's not. It's chickens, rabbits, turkey, ducks. It's class 1 animals are your typical household pets.
Okay, so it's a small farm animal, basically.
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else have any thoughts?
How do we proceed doing so?
Well, we can certainly put it on the next planning commission agenda.
And I guess he would pull the ordinance, put it in our packet, we would read it, and each come in with our own thoughts. If there's consensus, fine. If there's not, there's not, you know?
Have any of you guys ever had a rooster or lived next to a rooster?
Well, we could, we could say you can't have a rooster too. You can limit it however you want. And that's the thing, because the rooster makes noise.
The chickens I could see, but
Yeah.
roosters
is
are,
the wild card.
yeah.
So when we approve a site plan or come up with an ordinance, you can say it has to be X amount of feet from each property line. It has to be, in a caged area. It has, you can't have a rooster because of noise complaints. It can be 2 birds, 3 birds, 4 birds. We can set as many limits on as you personally would think is reasonable. So.
How it affects the homeowner associations and stuff like that?
And you can limit the parcel size because you probably wouldn't want it in, Snow Apple, where you have, small size lots, so, things like that.
Yeah, I'd say let's review it.
Review it?
Yeah.
Just put it, do we have to direct you to do that, or
I'll
you
do
just heard it and put it in our packet? Okay. Okay, moving on, approval of minutes from last meeting. Is there any changes?
No, I move for approval of the minutes of Thursday, January 12th, 2023.
Motion by Tully, support by Galley. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
I'll abstain. I only popped in for.
We have
Little
5
bit of
yes
master
and
plan.
1 abstention for Mr. Lockren. Consultants reports. Dick, any consultant reports?
I don't think I've got anything. I should have probably gotten a report for you from Megan on status of the master plan. I don't have it. I'm sorry, but I'll make sure that we'll give you a status update on that, even prior to the next planning commission meeting.
Yeah, I had 2 questions here for you in this section was, is there a next master plan meeting scheduled? And I also was gonna ask about Morgan Lake, if there's any update or if anything has progressed there. I didn't know with springtime coming, if they're gonna come in with another phase or whatnot, but I just thought I'd ask the question. If there's no answer, there's no answer.
Let me just back up just 1 minute. We are still trying to schedule, and I'd have to get and consult with Megan to find out the exact date. A workshop with the chamber that would predominantly, it would predominantly concentrate on Dixie Highway, but may involve other matters. So that's in the works. I think we're getting very close to wanting to start to produce some substance for the planning commission and move this thing forward. It's been going on for a little while here. We've got about as much information as we possibly could need to be able to start doing that.
Okay. Anything from Brian? Brian, anything to report?
No.
Discussion? Anybody have any
Under
discussion?
discussion?
Anything for?
I just had a question. I was driving home the other night, 26 Mile and Mound, and saw that great big Amazon facility. Has they ever, and I thought what that township meeting must have been like. You know, that planning commission, have they ever looked at Independence Township, or is anything, I mean, that thing is just a monstrosity.
What was that, like 15 years ago when they were scared of a big box over here? There was like a Citizens for Responsible Growth or something, and there was a little bit of a animosity on, but nothing ever
You're
happened.
talking
Well, I
about
mean,
the
we
corner
do
of
have-
Walden
Yeah.
there?
We had Magneti Morelli over on Bull Point, and now it's gonna be Lear Corporation.
Well, you know, we actually, and even prior to that, we had a very large
Beaumont.
warehouse distribution center that was proposed on the property that McLaren currently owns. That, very controversial. I mean, we were talking about a facility that
the
was
trucking-
like,
U-Haul trucking facility.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I mean, it was like 100, I mean, it was 70 to 100 trucks a day coming out Bow Point onto Sashabar Road. It didn't get approved.
It's in Auburn Hills, at the top of the hill when you drive southbound. You can see it. They moved there. Ryder Truck Terminal, I think it was.
Auburn Hills is perfect for it.
That's part of what we try to do with our master plan, isn't it, to not allow those huge facilities, whether it be retail, industrial, commercial, whatever.
We have a square footage limitation, right? See, so those big
It's huge.
operations can't come in. It's big enough for like grocery stores, but, and that one on Walden, they sued us because we turned it down
Oh, yeah.
with Walmart, I think.
Yeah.
And they sued us, but then,
Backed out.
well, really, the recession came along, and
Yeah.
I think they didn't want to do it anyway, probably.
Anything else for discussion? Nope.
Move to adjourn.
Adjourn at 7:29 PM. All in
Somebody-
favor?
Been
Aye.
seconded?
Oh,
Oh.
I second it. Okay. Motion by Richie, support by Galley. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We're adjourned.
Nice job.